This is the Last Gentleman podcast. We're really happy to be here with a killer stand-up comedian, podcast host, and radio host, Greg Fitzsimmons. Fitzdog Radio is his podcast. He's also on Howard 101. How are you doing today, Greg?
I'm good. It's great to talk to Canada.
Yes, a lot of love here. You were just in Edmonton not too long ago, right?
Well, a little while ago.
Well, a few months.
I think I'm coming back soon. It's all a blur. I pack my bag, and then I go to the airport, and I look at the ticket, and I see where I'm going.
Okay.
I love it in I love it in Canada, Greg, but my biggest failure as a man is that I still live winters here.
Yeah, I know. It's right now. It must be brutal, huh?
Oh, fucking cold.
Now, you're originally from New York. You live in L.A. now?
Yeah, I grew up with the cold, but now we're in Venice Beach. We literally just came from the beach right now. Went down there and kicked it around in the water. My daughter's a surfer, so
nice.
She actually she's 11, and she just competed in this meet. The girls were 14 and under, and she came in, out of 40 girls, she came in fourth. She was a badass.
That's impressive.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So Greg, why don't you, for our listeners who have not heard about you, why don't you tell us where you started in Boston, from Terrytown, New York. How did you get into comedy? Maybe even shitty jobs you've done along the way. Just how you started.
Well, I was in college when I started, so I was, going to class during the day, and then at night I would go down to an open mic and sign up and wait around all night. And I can remember like the buzz of knowing that there was a chance I was going on stage that night, and like being afraid but wanting it more than anything else, and the camaraderie with the guy. Like I started out with like Joe Rogan and Bill Burr and these guys, so we were all just hanging around trying to get on stage, and it was like the best times of my life. And then I started work. By the time I graduated college, I was actually making a living doing stand up. So I never had that job that you hated while you were doing stand up. Boston had a million clubs, and if you were able to get a good 15-minute act together, you could go out as an opener and get paid every night. So it wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to not have to work. And so I just pretty much smoked pot, watched movies, and did stand-up for about 4 years.
Living the dream.
Fantastic way.
Right.
It's a fantastic way to live life. Now, how did you translate? You made your way into radio? You have a great show, Fitzdog Radio. How did you find your way onto radio? Was that something you planned early in your career? Or did you kind of come across that?
Well, it's kind of funny because my dad was a radio guy my whole life. He was one of the biggest disc jockeys in New York for 25 years. And but I got into it I was on the other side of the microphone. I would go off to Philadelphia or Houston, and they'd get you up at the crack of dawn on a Friday morning, and you'd go do 5 or 6 radio interviews. And so I started to get good at just being a guest on a show and being able to be up early in the morning in the room with these guys and try to hold my own. And then I started doing the Howard Stern show, and I did Stern about 50 times. And then at one point he just went, "Hey, do you want your own show on my channel?"
Wow.
And I said, sure. And about 3 weeks later, I started doing it once a week, and that was about 7 years ago.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's wonderful how things work out. Do you have any preferences? Like, if you could only pick, it's kind of a crazy question, but if you could only pick one, if you had to do stand-up or broadcast podcast, do you have a preference? Would you be able to make that choice?
I don't. I have managed to not make choices like that I've been doing this 25 years, and I write for TV every year. I always write on at least 1 or 2 shows a year, and then I'm out doing about 22 weekends a year and stand up.
Wow.
And then I do about 100 podcasts a year. I do 50 radio shows. I host stuff. So it's like I've never chosen, and because I haven't been able to. Like, I've never been able to say I don't want to do this thing anymore. Like, I just can't. I can't give it up because I like to know that if one's not going well, I can always do the other one. and I'm not forced to do dates in places I don't really want to go, because if I don't want to, I'll just get a writing job for a while. So I think it's about balance and about doing all those things together.
Now, speaking of balance, you're a workhorse. You won 4 daytime Emmy Awards
for Ellen. Yeah,
you've like you said, you've written 4 shows. You worked on The Man Show, Chelsea Handler. You have a ton of stand-up appearances, shows.
Yeah.
What do you do to keep yourself, I guess, balanced, or do you ever worry about, like, how am I going to run up? How am I going to do all these jobs, keep being funny? Do you have any kind of traditions or pregame rituals to keep yourself strong and focused? Because that's a lot of work. It's a lot of accomplishments, but you have a lot on your plate.
Well, to me, it really just sounds so corny, but it really is true. Like, I have 2 kids that I love, and my wife, and that's it. It's like if I'm right with them, then everything else works out. It's like I spent the first half of my career just like really going after it. For the first 12 years, it was just 7 nights a week and every day, and traveling and going to acting school for 2 years while I was doing stand up. And I mean, I really think it's important, if you're going to go into a line of work like this, that you don't have any impediments
Yeah.
for a long time, and then you can finally get the family going, and that's what gets you into the second half of your career, is like having something solid, so that you're not living and dying by your successes, because you'll go nuts and you'll get bitter.
Well, that's a powerful point. You have to bring, like, the family give you something else to live for, and I guess it's made you quite successful because of all your accolades. You're a fucking killer stand-up.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of you. I really love Fitz Dog Radio. I love your solo. The ability to go solo for an hour and keep it relevant and entertaining is something that very few people can do.
You and probably Bill Burr are probably the only ones. Like, I don't know how Bill, you have, like, when you have a guest, you do the 10-minute intro, to shoot this talking about your week or whatever, and then you have the guest. But sometimes I hear someone like Bill Burr for an hour every Monday by himself. It's incredible.
Right.
It's the way you do it. It's entertaining. Like Mark Maron, I can't fucking stand those first 14 minutes of this podcast. Oh, fuck. I hate, like, no one gives a fuck about his cat,
Right. So what is it you find with him that you don't like?
I don't know. His interviews are very entertaining. I love his guests. He asks the right questions, but I don't know, those first 10, 12 minutes, I just don't like it. Something about it grinds my gears.
My issue with the first 14 minutes of Maron's podcast, and just, I know this is kind of an offside or an onside here, but I'm a new comedian. We have a radio show, a podcast, and work so hard. And Maron's a guy who's made it, and good for him. But just to hear him every week complain about, like, his cat has a hairball, and he seems to be going through an inner darkness about it.
Yeah.
It kind of grates, I think, a few listeners, and myself included.
Right.
Just a little bit of positivity or, like, real issues would be more appreciated.
And speaking about your podcast, Greg, when I Googled Fitzdog, one of the things that popped up is the Bob Zamuda interview.
Right.
So I heard that. What happened? What's your take on that ending where he just stormed off and there was words exchanged?
That's never happened before on a podcast with me. I mean, he came in, and obviously I have a ton of respect for him.
Yeah.
And, Andy Kaufman is one of my heroes, and like anybody who's in comedy, you watch what they did and see that they explored the boundaries of what comedy can really be, and they made it funny. And so I was thrilled to have the guy on, and I felt like I was being very respectful.
Well, you were, definitely.
And I thought so. And then, we got to a certain point, and he started talking about how Andy's not really dead, and he's going to come back. And I was kind of calling him on it, because I was like, look, man, come on, you've got this great legacy. And Andy Kaufman's got people that love him and family members, and you're playing this game, and it just seems disrespectful in a way. And then he started to just heat up. He's like, went 0 to 60 and started screaming at me. And I kind of didn't back down, because I didn't feel like I said anything that was so bad. And then he got up and he knocked a chair over and started screaming that I couldn't use the podcast because he hadn't signed a release. And I was like, I don't need a release. You fucking came on the show. And so he just like stormed out, and I've never heard from him since.
Wow. Were you close with Zamuda before that?
I never met him.
Oh, wow. It's fucking hilarious.
Never met the guy.
I had, we interviewed Zamuda. I work on a Sirius XM show called The Todd Shapiro Show. And we had Bob Zamuda on a few times talking about his book. And to me, it kind of seemed like Bob's doing this kind of bullshit, Andy Kaufman's still alive. It seemed like he was doing it to kind of keep the joke going, to kind of, I think that's kind of something maybe Andy would have wanted. I think the way he's going about it, though, writing an entire fucking book and touring it while his family's still around is a little bit much.
Yeah.
But he just he turns on a dime. And to hear him turn on you was interesting. I really think he's full of shit, though. I can't see... there's no way Andy Kaufman's still alive. I think a lot of people like yourself have kind of kept him on to kind of like... And not like yourself, actually. We had him on, and we were just kind of entertaining his bullshit a little bit. But, it was nice to see you call him out on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of it was great. I mean, a lot of his stories, I loved the interview up until things went badly. It was just... I think the guy... I don't know. Maybe there's something about... He knows he's full of shit about it, or, maybe in some, I don't know. Obviously, it's a gag, but I just feel like on my show I have to call bullshit when I see it.
Yeah, definitely. So you've had Zamuda on, you've had guests, Adam Carolla, you've had Joe Rogan on your podcast. Is there anyone that you have on that list that I'm just dying to have this guy on? But, just haven't had a chance, or booking conflicts or something like that. Who are you dying to have on your show now?
Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks.
I would love to have Mel Brooks on. He's my hero.
Wow.
And, I wrote him a letter, and he wrote me a handwritten note back.
Oh, wow.
That he couldn't do it at this time. But I'm still holding out hope. I interviewed Carl Reiner, so I'm getting closer.
Wow, nice. Well, Mel Brooks.
So I gotta try to see if Carl will hook me up with Mel.
Yeah, well, Mel's what, 88 now?
No, I think even older.
Oh my God,
he's got his own show now. I believe.
Yeah,
Mel Brooks has a podcast.
No, I think he just released an HBO special. I believe
he's still going.
Yeah, he was just on Carolla's Take a Knee podcast. I know him.
Mel Brooks was?
Yeah, Mel Brooks was just on Take a Knee. Carolla's Take a Knee podcast.
What's Take a Knee? I didn't know.
Well, Adam Carolla just started a new podcast called Take a Knee. It's a motivational podcast where he's had people like Terry Crews, Gene Simmons, and it's basically motivation, just how they got to be where they are, success stories, and so Carolla's been doing that for about. We had Carolla on in December to promote the show. And it's been going, I think it's probably since beginning of September.
Greg,
December, sorry.
This is the part of the show where my co-host Kevin plugs someone else's shit.
Right, exactly.
Well, it just came up. I'm just saying.
After you listen to these 7 podcasts that we described, maybe you'll check out Fitz Dog Radio.
Well, the only reason I bring it up because because you've been on Adam's show numerous times, and I got to say, you two are comedy gold together. If you guys need to start your own podcast or something together, a steady dose of Adam Carolla and Greg Fitzsimmons, it is
well, thanks. I had this fantasy when he was on terrestrial radio. I used to go in and do his show a lot, and I always had such a blast, like so much more than the other shows I'd ever done. And I had this fantasy that Danny Bonaducci, who was his sidekick, and I know he hated him. I had this fantasy that they were going to fire Danny, and then I could try to go in and get the job, and I could just hang with him every morning and just do what we do. But, then he went to the podcast. And I go on there. I'm going on there this week.
Nice.
I usually do it like once a month or so. Yeah. And then he comes on my podcast a lot. But, yeah, I mean, the great thing about Adam is you just wind him up and let him go. You don't have to kill yourself coming up with questions. Just, pretty much one topic will get you through an hour.
Yeah, definitely.
You've been like, I going back to this, I love your radio show on Sirius, and I love what you do in your podcast. Your dad was famous broadcaster. Do you have any certain steps? What do you think makes a good radio show? What do you think makes a good podcast? And what do you bring from those lessons and your experiences to what you do?
I don't know. I mean, I think I obviously got a head start because I'd been doing stand-up for so many years. So I think that, I sort of had a sense of how I talked. And I think when I do the podcast, I sort of feel like I know what it's like to talk to a crowd. So I have a little bit of that. It's a different energy, but I guess the dynamic is the same. I really feel like I know when things are getting dull. So it's time, like for me, it's all about having a dull meter in your head. So that, if you're talking about something and you're bored, then it's time to change topics. And I have no qualms about just turning on a dime and introducing a new topic, or doing something like I do a lot of interact with listener stuff. They send in overheard, things they've overheard on the street, or just letters to me. And I'll start reading one of those. I'll do whatever it takes to shake the boring out of the podcast.
That's powerful. I gotta ask you. You worked on HBO's Lucky Louie. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. What was your experience like working on Lucky Louie? I thought it was one of the most underrated comedy shows I've ever seen. How did you like it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think it was great because I've known Louie for a long time, and we've got at the time very similar lives. We lived about a half a block from each other, and our wives were good friends, and our kids are the same age, and so we just kind of. I came on to write on the show, and I knew his life, so it was easy for me to write for it. And it was just a privilege to be around Louie, watching his process. And, I'd written on TV shows with Louie before, and he's an inspiring guy to be around. He's just, and you realize that you can't do what he does. You have to work harder than he does, because he's just got some brilliance that's unmatched. And so we would do these episodes, and he would come up with a premise for a story that was so absurd that you would go like, that's not going to be a whole episode. That's just like one silly thing. And then you write it up and you shoot it, and you're like, wow, that was a great episode.
Now, when it comes to Louis C.K., he has revolutionized the whole, putting out your specials with the whole $5 special thing. Is there a part of you that kind of resents that, because now you gotta release everything? He started this trend now where you got Joe Rogan and Nick DiPaolo for $8, where you're selling your product very, very cheap. Is there a part of you that kind of gets angry at that because now it cheapens your 2 years of hard work putting out that hour?
No, not at all. I think just the opposite. I think that the threshold for getting your material out to the people that want to hear it is getting lower. It's like you don't need a network and a studio to believe in you enough to shell out the money and then keep all the back end. It's like, and give you notes on how to do it and be a part of the editing. It's like now you can just do it exactly the way you want to do it, in the kind of venue you want to do it in. And there's an honesty to knowing that like every copy that somebody downloads or pays for is, somebody that is going to become more of a fan, and I think they respect that you're doing it in a kind of independent way. I think it's great. I think it's it's obviously what the future is, because right now it's still a little bit difficult to just release it. You still need like a pretty complex website to be able to make it available to people at a cheap price and still make any money. So Louis can do it because of the amount of volume that he does, but the truth is most people aren't making much money on that model. But the other thing is, the networks aren't paying as much as they used to anyway, and then they barely play it. They'll play it 2 or 3 times, and that's it.
Well, I think the most important thing, as long as it puts ass in the seats, because I know if I just spend $5 taking a chance on a comedian I've never heard before, and I actually like them, guess what? Next time they come to Toronto, I'm going to go check them out. So I can imagine that would benefit the comedian.
You have a killer stand-up special that I watched not too long ago. Where can people find it? Where would I or our listeners get your stand-up specials?
Well, I don't know what the deal is in Canada with Netflix, but it's on Netflix.
Yeah, it just got taken off.
What's that?
It just got taken off the Canadian Netflix. You were on the Canadian Netflix, your special, then for some reason it got taken off. I don't know why.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Well, Hulu, I don't know if you guys can get Hulu, but it's available on Hulu as well.
Okay.
And then I'm pretty sure you can download it on iTunes.
Okay.
Now
for whatever they charge.
You get a hold of you at gregfitzsimmons.com. You have some live shows coming up in Huntington Beach. on the 28th
of February.
Is that?
Oh, that just got changed. Now I'm going to Addison, Texas that weekend.
Oh, okay.
Fantastic.
Okay, Twitter at Greg Fitzsimmons. And can we see, are we going to expect you to come down to Toronto anytime soon, or is he just going to stick to the West?
No, I'd love to come to Toronto. I just started working in Canada again recently.
Nice.
And, the audiences are great. I find more and more Canadians. I get a lot of feedback on my website from Canadian listeners. Yeah. And I love it. They're smart, and they like to laugh. I want to get to Toronto. Toronto's got the Shoe Museum, which is my favorite museum in the world. The fact that it's a 3-story museum for shoes.
And it still exists.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
It's one of the finest places to take a date and then also get a hand job. Able to close a date on at the
No,
shoe
you
museum.
get a foot job. You got to be a foot fetish guy.
Speaking, just one last question. You talked about foot jobs. You've talked about previous podcasts. I've heard you talk about your fondness for casting couch porn.
Right.
So I gotta ask, what was the last porn video you watched?
My friend just got me into these hidden camera Japanese massage lesbian videos, and they literally hide cameras in these massage rooms, and these Japanese female masseuses and they got like 3 cameras, and they'll start giving them a massage, and they'll just start getting closer and closer to their butt, and then their vagina, and then they flip them over, and they give them like intense breast rubs.
Wow.
And by the end, they've got them completely naked, and the women are going crazy. And it's like, you can't put, it sounds like it must be fake, but you can tell from the looks on the women's faces that you would need Meryl Streep could not play the beat of being surprised and then turned on that these women do.
Wow.
Japan's an interesting place.
Check that out.
All right, definitely.
Japan's an interesting place because they have this like sex problem right now where 50% of the men are uninterested in sex and deem themselves to be herbivores. That's the term they use down there, where they just don't want anything to do with women or relationships. So a lot of great points.
Why?
It's working too much.
Well, no, they haven't been able to. They haven't been able to figure it out. There's a lot of study going down there. There's these group of men, and it's 50% of the population are going out and just starting weird clubs where they just avoid women or sexuality altogether. They're starting like tea clubs and book clubs and they've just abandoned sexuality altogether over there, and it's starting to impact the population.
This is the time for the white man to swoop in and get some Japanese pussy.
We're taking the show on the road.
Yeah, we're going to take this show on the road, lay some dick down in Japan. Thank you so much, Greg. You can get a hold of you at Greg Fitzsimmons. It's been an honor to have you on. Yeah. You're one of the best stand-up comedians alive right now, and someone we look up to as a radio host as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the time. Thanks for having me on.
Thank
you so much.
Okay, bye.